Writing about my old poetry teacher reminded me of all the weird interactions I've had with teachers growing up. This one is probably the creepiest, which is why I've blocked the memory of it so long. The memories are a little fuzzy, honestly. When I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, the music teacher went on maternity leave, so we had a sub for a semester. He was a large man, but kind of had that gentle giant vibe. Or that's what my kid brain called it. I loved his classes. He talked about how music can make us feel and affect emotions. I always raised my hand when he asked questions or wanted to volunteer. I know there was a turning point, but I don't remember what it was. I just remember that he had started singling me out. He would talk to me before class as everyone was sitting down. He would pick me every time a hand was raised to pass papers out. He always picked me first when he asked questions that we had to answer. As a kid, I loved the attention. My older sisters are triplets, so his attention made me feel special, even though I wasn't a multiple. We would always walk together during fire alarms or when we would walk down the hall back to our teachers after specials. I was always the last person, so he could walk beside me and talk. I started talking about him to my mom. I remember that she was weirded out by it, but he never touched me, and he wasn't going to be there forever, so she just kind of kept an eye on the situation. Eventually, I started getting weirded out by it. I was picked to pass out papers first, and all my classmates groaned. One even said,
"You only ever pick her. No one else gets to pass out papers."
And that was when I started getting uncomfortable. I really was the only person he picked, or talked to directly. I stopped raising my hand to help, and he would still pick me. I stopped answering questions, but he asked me first if I knew the answer. I wouldn't openly talk when he walked beside me between classes either. For a while I thought that he was paying attention to me because my dad had a well-known music store in the area, and it had been a staple of the city for more than 100 years. But he never asked about my dad or his business. Eventually, my mother had enough and talked to my main teacher. She told her he needed to back off and that his attention made me and her very uncomfortable. But he didn't stop. If anything, I remember him making even more of an effort to talk to me. He'd ask me if I could hear the music in fire alarms, and maybe I was uncomfortable because I wasn't used to being that special. He hugged me after the last one, and I just stood stock still until he let go. Eventually, it was Christmas, and he was going to be done after the Christmas play. I had done everything I could to distance myself from him, and nothing worked. I was relieved that I wouldn't see him after the Christmas break. At the end of the play, he came and introduced himself to my parents. He told them how special I was, and I was an amazing and helpful student. He offered to tutor me privately. Obviously, my mother said no. My dad didn't think anything of it and just thought that he was a nice guy. Seeing as my dad was also a creep, it makes sense now that he saw nothing wrong with the man's behavior. For a good 5 years after that, he would write me letters and send me Christmas cards. He would ask to see me or for me to write back. I still don't know how he had my address. My mom used to open and read them, but something about them eventually made her just start throwing them away as soon as we got them. Then, after a year of no responses, he stopped writing. Now that I'm older, I realize that I was probably just too old for him to be interested in anymore. I don't remember his name, but I remember his face. And that creepy hug. In 2019, I was just 15 years old and I was in high school. At one point, I received a request to follow on Instagram from a 25-year-old guy. He was not unknown as he attended the same church as my family, but we weren't even friends. I only saw him once or twice and we never spoke. I was even surprised that he knew my name, because I didn't even know his name until that moment. He always liked my photos, replied to my stories with compliments, but I always tried to ignore it as much as I could. Or sometimes I would just say thank you and completely ignored any attempt of him trying to build a conversation. He was very insistent until one day he sent me some DMs saying that he would like to get to know me better and that he would like to take me out for dinner or something. But I obviously declined and was quite honest with him and said that it would never work since I was underage and he should look for someone his age. At that moment, I didn't want to sound rude as we had a high possibility of meeting in church again, and I wouldn't want to cause a strange atmosphere, and that's why I didn't block him at the first moment. After that, he seemed to be quiet, until the day I made a post with my friends at school. We took the photo inside the classroom, and I made the big mistake of tagging the location in the photo, the location of my school. Minutes after that, he sent me a DM saying,
"Oh, I live very close to your school. I think only 5 or 7 minutes away."
And I didn't answer. At that moment, it didn't cross my mind that this was a risk I could be taking. That same day, he continued to ask me if I would like to hang out with him after school, and that he could take me to lunch. And once again, I politely declined. I was getting annoyed by this point. My parents weren't enjoying the situation either, and told me that if I wanted, they would confront him about it. But I didn't want any problems or to be the target of comments in the church, as gossip often spreads quickly over there. I believed that ignoring was the best way, but it wasn't. The next day, our biology teacher had to leave school due to an emergency, so we had the last class time vacant. Me and my friends took our bags and went to the top floor of the school, where we had a complete view of the school entrance, and we stood there watching the street movement while we talked. That's when we noticed a man, leaning against a silver car a little more secluded in the corner of the street. But I could see perfectly who it was. At first I didn't believe it, so I went to his Instagram profile because I had remembered that he had some pictures with the car and just wanted to make sure that it was the same one. And to my misfortune, it was the same car. So I took my phone and zoomed in on his face, and had confirmation of what I already knew. It was him. I told my friends what was happening, and they got scared. He hadn't seen me up there, which was good, so we made a plan so I could get out of school without him seeing me. The moment the school bell rang, my 3 friends got in front of me, and I went down the school stairs behind them. They took me to my car, and I managed to get in without any problems and go home in peace. I didn't even look in the direction he was. When I got home, I went to my Instagram, just because I was going to confront him, but I got the surprise that he had blocked me, which was a relief, but also made me think that he saw me at school and knew that I had seen him. I told my parents what happened, but there wasn't much that could be done. After that, he never showed up at church again. I don't know what he intended waiting for me in front of my school, even after I said no multiple times. This is something that happened to me when I was around 15 to 16. I, a 24-year-old female, used to be painfully shy as a kid, so I had a few small groups of friends that I was always around. My first day of sophomore year, I met this guy. Let's call him Seth. He was 18 to 19-year-old male in one of my classes who seemed a little strange. I didn't think too much of it at the time because he seemed really nice. Finally, it was time for my favorite period, lunch. Lunch was reserved for my favorite people, 2 boys who graciously accepted awkward 13-year-old me after a dramatic move to my dad's home. One of the boys was actually my best friend and my first boyfriend. Let's call him Jay. So, we were really close and I trusted him more than anyone else. The other, let's call him Harry, was in the same class with me where I met Seth. Anyway, I sat at our table and we began to start comparing teachers when Seth randomly joins our table. I figured that he was just one of their friends, so we just continued like normal. After a few weeks, I started getting a little creeped out by Seth. He seemed to be everywhere I went in the school, and always stood way too close. If I asked him to step back, he would point out the other friends who stood closer. It was usually the same two guys that he would use as examples. For context, I am in a wheelchair and he was very tall, so my head was the same level as that area. I eventually found out that he had seen what my school login was and saved it to his computer. Now, I didn't want to immediately freak out and report him, so I decided that I was going to just ask him to delete it. He said that he would, and that was the end of it. As the months go on, Seth started to get worse. The class we had was a film class where the students would go out during the period in groups to do the project independently. This was very scary because he would immediately claim me in the group, and I was too nice to decline. Until we were put into pairs. He always tried to get me to film with him in the back fields behind our school. The way that he would suggest it got me so scared that I would refuse to leave the room. My teacher was amazing and didn't force anyone to go out. He would end up doing it alone and I would edit. While Seth was out, I decided to see if he deleted my login. He hadn't. He had at least 20 other logins saved on this document, and I was scared enough to report it to my counselor. My counselor was a complete idiot and decided to tell him that a girl in his class reported him. I found out because the next day he came to lunch and started accusing me and seemed really angry. I denied it, and Jay and Harry stuck up for me. It was shortly after this that I found out that neither of my friends knew Seth. He only knew of me when he joined our table. My counselor decided that my concerns were not important enough to notify our teacher or police. I guess it was not serious enough to warrant anything outside of the school. They didn't even notify my dad. After everything happened with the report, he went back to being creepy, but in a worse way. Every day he would convince me to go somewhere with him behind our school, and had gotten to the point where he was trying to tell me I had to. He would make up excuses for us to go somewhere alone. I didn't tell anyone about it besides the school and my teacher later, because at the time I wasn't sure if I was just being crazy. I think my friends might have expected that he was getting too pushy because they would start walking with me to classes when they could. I ended up telling my teacher what was going on, and he immediately started assigning seats and talked to another girl in my class to see if I could permanently join her group. Seth graduated at the end of that year and decided to resurface in my email inbox when I was 17 or 18. I blocked him.